So busy that you forget what truly matters. No time for a slow meal, a calm morning, or simply a moment to breathe. But one day, I came across a quote by Seneca. It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And that line felt like a mirror, reflecting the truth I had been avoiding. This video isn't for those who want to live faster. It's for you, the one who wants to live deeper. If you've ever felt like time keeps passing by, but you haven't truly lived, then I invite you to stay. And let's talk, just for a moment, about choice, awareness, and how a wise man never lets time dictate his life. Have you ever sat alone at night after a long, chaotic day and quietly asked yourself, why do I try so hard, yet still feel unrewarded? You're not alone. I've met many men, quiet, hardworking, responsible. And yet, deep inside, they carry a sense of injustice, a quiet ache that whispers, I've done enough, I've sacrificed enough, so why don't I have what I deserve? A friend of mine, over 40, divorced silently, loyal to a company for 15 years without ever being promoted, once told me, sometimes I just want to scream, I deserve better. I understand that feeling. It's deeply human, but it's also the place where we begin to lose our inner strength. Intelligent men don't suppress emotion, but they learn to transform it. They understand that when you say, I deserve better, you might have stepped out of the driver's seat of your life and become someone who waits, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting for fairness, waiting for life to reward you like some cosmic paycheck. But Marcus Aurelius, Rome's philosopher-emperor, once wrote, don't say, I have worked hard, so I deserve a reward. Say, I have done the right thing, so that is enough. It may sound harsh, but there's a quiet, radical freedom in that. You act because it's right, not for reward, not for recognition, just because it aligns with your values. I'm not saying you shouldn't want more, but I've seen how many people get stuck in bitterness simply because they keep comparing their effort to the reward that hasn't come yet. They become resentful, tense, fragile, and ironically, that bitterness pushes the world away, like a silent spiral. The wise man, he doesn't beg fate. He doesn't complain about what hasn't arrived. He looks within and asks, what have I done today to become stronger than yesterday? Because sometimes the reward doesn't come as money or praise. It comes as calm, as freedom from needing validation, as the steadiness to stay grounded when nothing is certain yet. I once worked with a man in his 50s, a small business owner. He told me, I no longer wait for clients to understand me. I just need to know I did the right thing today. And you know what? It was that quiet firmness that made others trust him, sign with him, stay with him. Sometimes life isn't unfair. We've just placed our expectations in the wrong place. So don't search for your worth in the reactions of others. Find it in the silent, repeated acts you do each day when no one is watching. Because when you stop saying, I deserve more, you enter a new space where you're no longer waiting to be given, but actively building what matters. And that's the only place where you're truly strong. You don't need anyone's approval. You just need to know you're on the right path. If you see yourself in these words, ask yourself, am I living for what's right or just for what I hope to receive? And if that question leaves you silent, then maybe, just maybe, you're beginning to grow in the deepest way. 2. I can't change. That's just who I am. An excuse or a quiet surrender? Have you ever heard yourself say that? A stressful moment, a repeated mistake, a knee-jerk reaction? Then you sigh and say, I can't change. That's just the way I am. I once had a student, a 38-year-old man, intelligent, calm, but he always avoided facing his true emotions. Every time we discussed changing how he treated his wife, he'd just smirk. I've been like this since I was a kid. That's not gonna change. Sound familiar? But you know what? It's that very thought, this is just how I am, that keeps us stuck. Not your personality, not your past, but a label you've placed on yourself. I once read a line from Seneca that kept me quiet for a long time. No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. Adversity isn't what we should fear. What's truly frightening is using it as an excuse to stay still. I used to be like that. I told myself, I'm hot-tempered because my parents were too. Or, I react this way because of old wounds. Sounds reasonable, right? But if you always believe you're a product of the past, you'll never truly own your future. A wise man doesn't deny his wounds, but he also doesn't hide behind them forever. He knows every reaction can be replaced with effort. He chooses to live each day as a version in progress, not perfect, but always improving. You may not change overnight, but you can start by not using personality as a shield, by observing yourself instead of defending, by staying quiet before old habits and choosing a new action, even the smallest one. Someone once asked me, how do I know if I'm truly changing? I answered, when you stop saying, that's just who I am, and start asking, could I be different? That's when the change begins. You know, the greatest changes often arrive quietly, not from grand declarations, but from small choices repeated daily with patience and dignity. And one day, when you look back, you'll smile and say, I'm no longer who I was, and I'm grateful I didn't stay trapped in what I once called my true self. So if you're standing at that threshold, between repeating the past and stepping towards something new, choose the slower road, but make it intentional. Because you're not a fixed blueprint, you're a living work of art, and you are the one holding the pen. 3. It's not my fault, a small sentence, a heavy cost. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Everything's a mess, emotions tight as a drawn bowstring. Something has gone wrong, and the first reaction that flashes in your mind is, that wasn't my fault. Maybe that's true. Maybe you didn't make the mistake. Maybe someone else was careless, selfish, or unaware. But I want you to pause for a second and ask yourself, if I keep holding on to the idea that it's not my fault, what will actually change? The answer, unfortunately, is often nothing. I remember an old friend, he once went through a broken relationship. For an entire year after the breakup, he kept saying, it was all because she changed, she betrayed me. I did nothing wrong. Imam quote. And to be fair, most of the fault really wasn't his. But you know what the saddest part was? After a whole year, he was still at the starting line. Still bitter, still closed off, still living as someone else's victim, simply because he couldn't take responsibility for his own emotions. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once wrote, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Responsibility isn't about taking the blame. It's a silent declaration. I will not let this define me. I will do something with it. You don't need to be the one who caused the storm, but you can choose to not let it drown you. An intelligent man does not blame, not because he's always right, but because he understands. Every time he chooses responsibility, he reclaims authorship over his life. You can begin simply. When something bad happens, instead of asking, who caused this? Try asking, what can I do about this from here? That is the moment you step out of victimhood and into the role of a creator. I'm not saying you should take all the blame. I'm simply inviting you to reflect, is being right worth more than my inner peace? Because sometimes forgiveness isn't for others. It's the gift we give ourselves to move forward. And when you learn to be silent about blame, but act from responsibility, you don't just become stronger. You become unshakable. Have you ever said the words, it's not my fault to someone? And then, what changed after that? If the answer is nothing, then maybe it's time to choose it. 4. I know everything, the sweet trap of self-satisfaction. I once sat with an older man. He had a respected career, a happy family, and the steady gaze of someone who's weathered many storms. When I asked him what stops people from growing, he didn't hesitate. It's when they believe they know enough. Have you ever met someone like that? Someone who always has the answer, always has advice, but rarely asks questions, someone brilliant but always right? I know everything. It sounds confident, powerful, but in truth, it's the sentence that blocks new learning. Because the moment you believe you know, you've closed the door to receiving. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What we don't know is always more than what we think we do." A Roman emperor and a philosopher reminded himself of that every single day. Do you remember what it felt like to be a child, when everything was unfamiliar, and you asked, why, with wonder at the world? Truly intelligent people preserve that spirit into old age. They learn from those younger than them. They listen even when they already understand, because they know a new perspective can reveal depths they once overlooked. A client of mine, a CEO of a major company, once said, "Only when I stopped trying to prove I knew everything did my team truly start to respect me." Because when you listen, you make others feel valued, and often they end up teaching you something you never saw coming. So if someone offers you feedback or a view that contradicts yours, don't be too quick to reply, "I already know." Try asking instead, "What part do I know? What might I have missed?" Because the smartest person in the room is the one who knows they can always be wiser, and that humility is the real gateway to wisdom. Have you ever found yourself stuck in a know-it-all mindset? If yes, don't worry. We all fall into it sometimes. But from today, try opening your heart like a student, and you'll be surprised by how much life is still whispering to teach you every single day. That's a stupid idea, and the high cost of premature judgment. I once sat in a meeting where a young man was presenting his idea. He spoke hesitantly, his voice trembling, his concept a bit unusual. Just a few seconds in, an older man cut him off. "That's a stupid idea." And I saw, not just the idea crushed, but the light in that young man's eyes fade. Have you ever witnessed something like that? Or worse, have you ever been the one who said it? When we call an idea stupid, we're not just judging the words. We're dismissing the thought process, the courage, and the belief someone placed in what they shared. Intelligent people don't judge in haste because they understand every idea, even if unpolished, carries a seed that deserves to be seen. Seneca once reminded us, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth to listen more than to refute." A truly wise person does not seek opportunities to show superiority over others. They seek to find value in what others are trying to express, even if it's clumsy, messy, or contradictory. I once had a client, a university lecturer, who said, "I used to hurt a lot of students just because I thought I was smarter than them." And what haunted him was not that they were wrong, but that he never gave them the chance to be right. So if one day you hear an idea you don't agree with, pause for a moment. Don't rush to say that's stupid. Instead, try asking, "Can you explain a bit more? Why do you think that way?" You may be surprised. When you choose to listen instead of dismissing, you might end up being the one who learns something new. Intelligent people don't kill young ideas with contempt. They water them with respect and give those seeds a chance to bloom. Because in the end, what helps someone grow is not winning, but the kindness in how we treat others' thoughts. I once had a conversation with a man in his 40s, an engineer with a family and a stable life, but he always felt something was missing. When I asked if he had ever tried writing, drawing, or playing music, he smiled and said, "I'm not creative. That's just not who I am." Have you ever said something like that? The phrase, "I'm not creative," often doesn't come from truth, but from a mislabeled memory. Maybe it was a childhood painting that was criticized, a poem no one read, an idea that was ignored. And from there, we closed our hearts to any new experiments. But in Stoic philosophy, creativity isn't an innate talent. It's the ability to respond flexibly to life. Epictetus once said, "You cannot control what comes your way, but you can always choose how to respond." And how you choose is a form of creativity. You don't need to be a painter, musician, or writer to be creative. If today you find a new route instead of staying stuck in old traffic, you're being creative. If you choose kindness over anger, you're being creative. If you write a few journal lines to untangle your thoughts, you're being creative. Creativity is not about masterpieces. It's about giving yourself space to breathe, to try, to fail, then to understand yourself more. Intelligent people don't reject creativity. They start again with the smallest things: a tune, a blank page, a cake they've never baked. So if you've ever told yourself, "I'm not creative," try asking, "Have I ever allowed myself to try?" Because maybe you're not lacking creativity, you just lack the gentleness to believe you deserve to explore yourself. And when you dare to live in that spirit, even for a few minutes a day, you'll see your ideas were never gone. You just never opened the door. I can't do that. Or the silent prison of self-doubt. Have you ever stood before something new and instantly said, "I can't do it"? Maybe it's learning a new skill, starting over after heartbreak, or simply saying what you truly want. That seemingly harmless sentence is like a silent lock, keeping you trapped in a cage called self-doubt. I once worked with a middle-aged man. He wanted to learn to write a book, but as soon as he picked up the pen, he closed the notebook and said, "I'm not a writer. I can't do it." I asked him just one thing: "Who told you that before you told it to yourself?" And he went quiet. You know, no one is born knowing everything. Even Marcus Aurelius, the great emperor, wrote to himself every morning in silence, not for anyone to read, not to become a legend, but to remind himself he was still learning, still training. Intelligent people don't deny difficulty. They just don't shut the door before trying to turn the key. Instead of saying, "I can't do that," try replacing it with, "I haven't learned how to do that yet." Just change a few words, and you're no longer the one who gives up, but the one who's on the path of learning. And if you're standing at the threshold of something new, a job, a relationship, a chapter of life you're not sure you can handle, remember, no one has all the answers the first time around, but the one who dares to take a step is the one who can rewrite the definition of himself. Would you dare to try instead of saying, "I can't do it"? Gently ask, "What if I started today?" The path of change always begins with a question like that. 8. I'm not good at math, or the limits we've bound ourselves to from the past. Have you ever said to someone, or even repeated in your own head, "I'm not good at math," and then stopped right there, didn't try again, didn't try to understand it better? I've heard this phrase countless times, not only from students, but from people halfway through life. Businessmen, investors, those wanting to start something new. And then when faced with numbers, they freeze. "I'm not good at math," like a full stop. But you know what? That statement isn't really about math. It's about fear, about a past mistake, about a judgmental glance from a teacher or a family member, about a low test score, and since then, a label placed on self-worth. And we believed that label, then carried it as truth for many years. A friend of mine, 43 years old, once said, "Just seeing a spreadsheet makes my heart race. I avoid it like fire, but deep down I know I don't want to depend on others forever." And so he started again, from basic concepts, not to become an expert, but to speak confidently about finances with his own child. Just a few months later, he told me, "Turns out I wasn't bad. No one was ever patient with me before." The philosopher Epictetus once said, "We are disturbed not by events, but by the views we take of them." Math is not the enemy. Our thoughts about math, that's the real limit. If today you still think you're not good at something, try switching that sentence to, "I don't understand it yet, but I'm learning." Just like that, you're no longer defined by the past, but guided by an open future. Are you still carrying an old label that you're now ready to peel off? If so, leave a comment below. I allow myself to learn again with kindness, because you deserve to learn in the way you were never taught. With patience, with respect, and with yourself. 9. I don't like reading. Or when we forget how to sit still with ourselves. Have you ever heard or even said this phrase, "I don't like reading"? It sounds harmless at first, but sometimes it's a sign that something inside us is running dry. Not everyone has to be a book lover. No one's forcing you to dive into thick philosophical novels. But reading isn't just about absorbing information. Reading is a silent conversation between you and thoughts you've never had. I have a friend who works in engineering. Busy, straightforward, practical. He once told me, "Reading isn't for me, that's for dreamers." But then, during a crisis in his marriage, he couldn't find the words to express his feelings. He didn't know how to listen to his wife, didn't know how to express pain without turning it into anger. One day, I gave him a small book, not about psychology, but the journal of Marcus Aurelius. Very short, very real, one-line read. You can control your thoughts. No one can stop you from doing that. That alone, and he told me, I felt calmer, like someone understood me without me having to explain. Since then, he started reading, slowly, not because books changed his life, but because they helped him sit with himself for the first time in years. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." You might have thought reading was a luxury, in a world overflowing with things to do. But sometimes, just 10 minutes with a page is enough for you to hear your truest inner voice again. And if today you've also thought you're not a reader, try starting again, not with expectation, but with kindness. Pick a thin book, a short poem, a small philosophical note. You don't have to understand everything. Just open up enough for something to enter. No rush, no pressure, just one quiet step toward yourself. If you're relearning how to read, leave a comment. I allow myself to slow down, to listen, and maybe at that moment you'll realize we don't read to know more. We read to live more deeply. I don't have time, or when busyness becomes the mask of misdirection. Have you ever said this? I don't have time. That sentence sounds perfectly reasonable. We all have packed schedules, dozens of tasks to handle, responsibilities to bear. But have you ever asked yourself, do I really not have time, or have I let life decide for me what's important? A friend of mine once said in exhaustion, I don't have time to sleep enough, to read, to exercise, to talk to my child. I asked, but do you have time to scroll your phone at midnight, to attend unnecessary meetings, to do things for others that they should do themselves? He went silent. The truth is, we don't lack time. We're just living without clear priorities. A wise person never says, I don't have time. They say instead, this is not important enough for me right now. And that is a choice, mindful, clear, and deeply responsible. Epictetus once reminded, don't be blindly busy. Live as if your time is limited, because it truly is. Imagine a morning like this. You wake up without rushing to grab your phone. You spend 5 minutes breathing deeply, 10 minutes writing down 3 things you want to do differently today. You begin your day, not with speed, but with clarity. You cannot control everything in life, but you can control how you enter the day. If today you've ever found yourself saying you don't have time for the things that matter, try changing the question. Instead of asking, do I have enough time? Ask, what am I spending my time on? And is it truly worth it? If this resonates with you, leave a comment. I choose to live intentionally, not just be busy. Because in the end, it's not time that makes a life, it's how you use it. And a wise man always knows, being busy is not a badge. Intentionality is power. Life is always busy, but you deserve moments to slow down, to breathe deeply, and to listen to yourself. If today you're searching for a more mindful, peaceful way to live, then I believe you are not alone. This channel is where I share reflections from Stoic philosophy, simple, yet powerful enough to guide you back to your inner values. No magical formulas, just gentle reminders to return to yourself. Live more deeply, more slowly, but with more clarity. If anything I said in this video touched you, please press like, so I know you're walking this path too. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next reflections, meant just for you, someone moving through a thoughtful season of life. Leave a comment, even if it's just one sentence. I choose to live intentionally. That might be the quiet beginning of a very real, very gentle transformation. See you in the next video.